All right, so here's where we left off in the last step. You know, things are starting to come together. We have a fully renderable halftone web component right here. We're feeding it in an image and it's rendering a SVG halftone pattern. We've also taken over our floating header layout and we've added a plus button to add an image of our own once we wire it up. We've also rendered a few thumbnails that we can use to switch between different images. But we still have some layout that needs to be resolved. It needs to be filled in. This is all placeholder. Well, good news. In our next step, we're going to take care of all of that. We're going to fill in all our remaining placeholder layout with actual components that they're not going to function yet, but our task of doing the layout is going to be complete. So also in our last step, we've copied and pasted some starter components. You know, they're blank. They contain no markup. They contain no CSS, but we can start filling them in. So let's start doing that with the floating footer. So we'll start in the floating footer.html file. So the purpose of the floating footer in purple right here is I want to add some buttons that, you know, you can save this rendered halftone SVG as an actual SVG file or a PNG or a JPEG. So I want to add some buttons here that let you do that. Now the buttons I'm going to add are slightly different. So they're going to be action buttons versus the normal Spectrum buttons. And these action buttons, they're meant to be able to take action on something. And they're more squarish. They're a little more muted rather than the bold blue you get from like a call to action button. So let's import those. This is the action button. And then we're importing the SP icon again, the Spectrum icon. And again, we're dipping into the workflow icons and we're grabbing a vector draw icon and an image icon. Now the HTML here I'm adding is really easy. We're just adding 3 Spectrum action buttons. Each one of those contain an icon, again, size medium. We're making sure that the outside action button knows that each icon is a named slot named icon, so it knows what to do with them. And we're adding icons. So our Save as SVG button, it's going to have a vector draw icon. And our Save as PNG button, it's going to have an image icon. Likewise with our Save as JPEG, it's going to be another image icon. So let's load this up and see what it looks like. So yeah, like this floating header right here, this floating footer is looking good, except the buttons are, you know, they're kind of bunched up and they're bunched up to the corner here. So let's give it the same CSS treatment we did before. So we're adding styles here to our floating footer CSS. And again, our component is going to be a flexbox container. It's going to justify all the content over to the right side. Padding is 15, and again, the width is going to be 100% minus the padding. And each action button is going to have a margin right of 10 pixels, so they're better spaced out. And yes, this is looking better. And again, we're having the same problem with our inline styles here on the main component HTML. So let's address that. Let's take care of this inline style here, especially this 100% width, which is mucking with our padding that we want, so we can't have that. So yeah, given that our side panel here is the only thing remaining with inline style, so yeah, let's get rid of this inline style. And of course, right away, it disappears. That's not a bug. It's because the inline style was the only style in place that gave it an actual width. So let's just add some style to the actual web component CSS itself. Yeah, so here in sidepanel.css, we're styling our host, our web component itself. So the display is going to be a flexbox again. We're going to lay out our user interface elements in a column, so top to bottom. Our height is going to be 100% of the page minus our padding times 2. And then the background color, we're going to use a Spectrum CSS property just to give it a slightly subtle gray as a background to offset it from the rest of the application. And the width, this is what we need to actually give it some size and make it appear on the page again, which is give it the width 250 pixels. And the overflow Y, we're going to let it scroll when it needs to scroll. And we're back in business, so I don't know how well it shows up over video, but you can see that this background is slightly gray. And yeah, it's appearing again. So that's important to start adding things to it. So yeah, just to be quick about things, I'm going to go over to sidepanel.html and import everything I know I'm going to need here. We're going to start with a divider. This is just a simple visual dividing line that separates things from other things. We're going to have a picker, which is, whatever you want to call it, a drop down, a combo box. It's a picker. And then a field label. So we can put labels next to some kind of input field, whatever that may be. And then menu items are the things that populate the picker or the combo box. And then we're going to have a slider and a color slider and a color area and some tabs and also a switch. And a switch it's basically on or off. It's a toggle. So yeah, to start things off, we're going to add a logo container, which is going to contain like a logo box. And then a divider below that to visually offset it from the rest of the stuff we're going to put in this side panel. And I'm also spacing it out with some line break tags, which probably isn't the best practice, but rather than adding more CSS than I need to, I'm just going to fall back to line breaks. And so yeah, when we load this up again, we can see what's maybe going to be our logo. And I want to get this logo looking like it should, like I expect it to. So let's add this CSS now. I'm hopping over to sidepanel.css, and I'm adding style for our logo container and our logo. So our logo container is just, it's a container that has some flow and aligns items in a flex box. And then our logo here, it's just going to be an empty white box with a black border around it at a specific size of 50 pixels square. And yeah, so let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so this is looking like how I meant it to look. Like I said, this is going to be where our logo is going to live, and then our title of this project is right next to it. And back in our side panel HTML file, let's start adding some things like the picker. Now this picker, so we have a field label right next to it, and this for attribute, it's basically for accessibility. If we're not worried about accessibility, which I really should be, but this is just a demo project. If we were worried about accessibility, I'd say ID equals picker icons. And this associates the field label with the picker, and we're choosing a shape from this picker. And if we look at this right now, we should see the combo box. So here it is. It's completely empty though, so let's fill it up. And how I'm gonna fill this up, I'm going to import one more thing. We're going to import some renderers from the Halftone web component project. And so now I'm going to add menu items to this picker component. So we're going to query the renderers.shapetypes and map each shape type that's supported in our Halftone component. We're going to map that to an SP menu item, the actual menu items that make up the picker. We're also going to do something that looks a little more visually pleasing by uppercasing the first character in each of these shapes. And so here we have it, and our menu is filled out, but it's up to the top. It's not appearing where it should be, where you expect it to, right here. And there's a reason for that. So we can see the bug right here. Reference error, process is not defined by this floating UI. It might not be obvious what this is, but I've had this problem before. Basically what's happening is this floating pop-up manager, it needs a little help to know whether it's running in Node or it's running in a browser. So you might ask, why would this need to run in Node.js? Well, maybe it needs to run as a suite of tests when you're actually writing unit or functional tests, and it can't error out in that case. So it could run in Node. And so if we go all the way back to our index.html at the root of this project, I'm just going to add a script tag that says window.process equals this stuff. We're just trying to make things not error out when it queries node_env. There's actually better ways to do this. There's a web dev server rollup based plugin that can put the mode of your app, the web serving, into a production mode. But like I said before, I don't want to get into the details of making a web dev server configuration file just yet, where we can do a hack like this that works pretty well. So yeah, the other thing I didn't see when I was looking at this is I didn't see a value being populated to the picker. So let's just hardcode one now so it looks visually how it's supposed to look. And we'll worry about wiring it up later. All right, so now when we reload this, we can see circles being populated in the menu here. We can also see the pop-up appearing in the right place, which is key, of course. And because I have circles as the value of the picker, it's also showing up as selected, a check mark next to it in the menu here. So back in the side panel HTML, let's just keep adding markup. This is fun, right? We're filling out components. It's great. So I'm going to add some more line breaks to fill this in. We've added a field label for the spread or the distance between the halftones, basically what size they'll appear as. We're adding a slider as well, and more line breaks, of course. And we're adding the switch. So the toggle switch that will invert the pattern to be, it's gonna, like the shape rendering will be either the background or the foreground. And yeah, when we reload this, we can see some real progress here. We have the slider for the spread, and we have the switch to invert the pattern. So let's keep going. And the last set of things I'm going to add here in this side panel is several things. We're going to add some tabs, and we're going to have a halftone tab or a background tab. And these are for switching between the different modes to choose what the color goes to. So this color slider and this color area. So this color slider is a hue slider, and this color area is basically a two-dimensional picker where you can choose saturation and lightness at the same time. And when the user chooses what color they want, it's either going to go into the background or the foreground or the halftone, depending on what this tab says. Now, to explain this better, of course, it's helpful to see. So we have the halftones or background tab, our hue slider, and of course our saturation and lightness picker. So now one thing I noticed before is that you can start shrinking this down, and these color sliders, they kind of collapse in on themselves. That's not good. So let's give them some minimum height. We'll do that in the side panel css.js file. So again, we're just calling them out by their tag names and giving them some minimum height. And now when we shrink this down, we have something that scrolls because there's not enough space. So yeah, this is everything we want to do in this step. We've got our application completely laid out now. It's looking good. The next things that need to happen is we need to wire things up. We need to be able to change the shape and have it actually affect the halftone, or change the spread, and these shapes will get bigger or smaller. So we need to wire things up next, so stay tuned.